Today we're going to talk about plotting data. So hopefully you've been following this introductory videos in R. And we have our Chicago employees data. So I'm going to get the data. Then I'm going to group them by departments, and I'm going to compute the salaries of those departments. I also grouped it by police officers and their salaries, just to get some data. Okay? You should watch the videos to see how all of this is done. But let's execute all of this. I can select all of this and run it. Okay, oops, a lot of functions were not found. Why? Because I started this again, but I did not load the library deployer, right? So every time I start R, I have to do this library deployer command, not the install packages, but the library deployer command. So I'm going to run that command, and then I'm going to run all these. And everything is good. Everything's blue. All my variables are here. That's all good. So I can do a bunch of things now. I can, for example, do a histogram, okay, of the prices of chai amps, for example, salaries, employee annual salary, and this will create a histogram. But this is a very crude graph, and usually the graphs that come with R are fairly crude. You can customize them to a great extent, but to make it easier, there's another library. Just like there's dplyr to manipulate data, there's another library that's very popular that makes manipulating graphs a little bit easier. But if you think there's a lot to manipulate, okay, so for example, in this histogram, this size of bins could be smaller, giving us a more rounded shape, for example. The scale could be adjusted, these labels could be changed, we can change colors and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of options for graphics. So don't be discouraged by what comes next, which is graphing. This is a very good way. It's consistent. You can do very many things with a similar philosophy. And this library that we're going to load, it's called GGPlot. But before that, we need to install it just like we installed dplyr. So I'm going to put here install packages and then GGPlot 2. Okay, that's the library. So I'm going to run this command, and you see that it's running here, and it's going to display the, going to the internet and retrieving the packages window there. And now it's installed, and now I need to use it with the same command, library ggplot2. Okay, so I'm going to run it. Again, I did not have any errors, so that's good. And then when I run it, hopefully I won't have any errors. Just a warning, that's fine. Okay? So now that I have ggplot2, I can do the same histogram like this. ggplot, this is a common structure for ggplot. First, the data, the original data source where I want to extract stuff. So chai amps. Then you do AES. This specifies what's going to go in the axis of the graph. For a histogram, you want the x-axis to have the salaries, employee annual salary. You don't want a y-axis because that's a frequency and that's going to be computed. And here's the thing, this is the basic ggplot command, the data and what's going to go in the axis. Okay, no y-axis in this case because it's a histogram. But then you tell it what kind of plot this is. You put a plus sign, hit enter, right? And tell it that you want geometry, histogram. Just that. And you go for it. And then it creates a histogram that's a lot nicer, right? So I'm going to save this command here. Notice that if you copy something like this, I'm going to put here plots. If you copy something like this, you're going to have this plus sign and this plus sign. That should go away. All right. So if I run this command, if I highlight and run this, you'll see that it creates the plot for me. Okay. Now, I can actually do a bunch of other interesting things with this. For example, I can say, I can add another plus sign here, Oh no, that's fine. So another thing that I can do is I can say, for example, in the histogram, I can pass parameters in here. For example, I can do color equals black and the fill equals red, for example. And if I run this command again, if I run this again, I'll get my plot, but with different colors, right? And it looks nicer. So there's a lot that I can customize. Another plot that it's pretty common is a bar plot. So for example, let's plot the average salaries of all departments. Our data for this, we computed in the previous video, is this department's data. Is the salaries data. So I'm going to create a bar plot for this. I'm going to do GGPlot. My data now is not going to be the Chicago employee. It's going to be the salaries data that I created earlier. Because this is an XY axis, on the X-axis, I'm going to have the department, and on the Y-axis, I'm going to have the employee annual salary. Okay, and then plus. And now what kind of plot is this going to be? This is going to be geom bar, so I'm going to have a bar graph. And then what I want, bar graphs can have a couple of functions for the bars. What I want to do here is stat what statistic is going to go in the bars, quote identity. I'm going to explain this in a second, but we run this and we get, oops, employee annual salary is not found. Well, why is that? So let's see if my data salaries, let's see what that looks like. View, I know what, salaries. My data salaries, oh, the column is called AVG salary in this data. So here, AVG salary. Is it AVG salary? AVG salary, yes. Now I can run this and see my plot. This is a bar plot, and each one of these here is a department. I can actually zoom in the graph. I can zoom. I can make it bigger, and you start seeing that some of these are the names of the department that are overlapped. So they all overlap with each other, and it's impossible to see what department is what. So one thing that I can do with this graph is I can put more stuff in there, right? So for example, another thing that I can do is I can flip it, right? I can do plus here and then do chord flip. That flips the coordinates, all right? So now if I run it, if I run this command, I'm going to have it here. And now if I zoom this graph, I see all the departments, right? And their salaries. And we can see that here, family support gets a very low salary, just as OEMC, right? I believe that's Office of Emergency. I don't know. But we get this graph, and now we can read it. Another thing that we can do, okay, is, for example, change the color just like we did in the histogram, right? So here, after identity, I can say color equals blue, for example, right? And then the fill is going to be white, okay? I do that and I get a different graph. But then there's another thing that I think it's really useful here. Now, what I want to do here is to generate this in different colors because it's ugly right now. So in here, in the AES, okay, I'm going to add this fill department. So I give the axis X, Y, and the fill color that's going to be automatic based on the column, the values of the column department, which is right here, departments. These are the departments. So I can run this and we can see what is produced here. So it takes a little bit to come up, but then it comes up. This is really bad because you can't see it here because it's because it was very cramped. But if I zoom in, right? If I zoom in, I'm going to make it this size, right? You can see all departments, right? All departments and the different what the colors represent, right? This makes it easier to have it in a bar form that goes up, for example, right? So this is the salaries by department. And you can make a lot of really nice plots. You can change a few things here. For example, I'm not going to flip the coordinates anymore. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, for example, change the labels, okay? But you can add labs for labels, and then you can say, for example, the title is Salaries of Chicago Employees, right? And then on the x-axis, okay, the label is going to be department. And on the y-axis, the label is going to be salary, right? Now let's run this command, this whole thing now. And we'll run it. And this is going to look very cramped because it's going to happen in here. Now it takes a while to produce it, but if I zoom it, I should have a nicer visual of this, right? So here, because it's cramped, I can't see the departments, but I can know them, what they are from here, right? And I have salary on this axis, department on the x-axis, and the title of my graph is Salaries of Chicago Employees. So suffice to say, you can change the scales, you can change a bunch of things in here, in this graph. You can create dot plots with geom.plot. You can change the geometry to create any kind, a lot of graphs that you want, okay? So plotting and visualizing data can be easy. Grouping data can be easy with R, and manipulating data is easy with R. After this video, if you've been following along, and you understand what's happened here so far, I think you're ready to go and learn advanced R and use some more statistic functions in R, such as comparing means and stuff like that. Thank you. I hope you like this series, a more advanced series